Have you ever woken up one morning and realized that the life you've been living for decades was built on a secret you never saw coming? Imagine giving your heart, your youth, and your dreams to someone, only to discover that the person you loved most was hiding a truth so deep it would shatter everything you thought you knew. This is not just a story about heartbreak. This is a story about betrayal, regret, and the unexpected paths life can take when the truth finally comes out. Before we dive into this unbelievable journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss more real-life stories that challenge what you think you know about love, loyalty, and the human heart. Now, let's step into the world of Eleanor, a woman who, at 50, found herself standing at the edge of a life she never imagined. For 25 years, Eleanor believed she was living the dream. She and her husband, Richard, had built a quiet, comfortable life in a small town. Their days were filled with routines: morning coffee on the porch, Sunday dinners with friends, and long walks through the park. To everyone around them, they were the perfect couple, steady, reliable, and inseparable, but behind closed doors, Eleanor carried a silent ache. She and Ricard had tried for years to have children, but it never happened. Doctors could find no reason, and friends would offer well-meaning advice, but nothing changed. As the years passed, Eleanor buried her longing for a family deep inside, convincing herself that love was enough. She poured her energy into her marriage, her home, and her community, always putting Richard first. What she didn't know was that Richard was fighting a battle of his own, a battle he never shared, not even with the woman who loved him most. For Richard, every day was a performance. He played the role of detachment, but inside, he was haunted by a secret he couldn't escape. He tried to be the man Eleanor needed, but the truth was, he was living a lie. The turning point came on an ordinary Tuesday. Eleanor was folding laundry when she found a letter tucked inside Richard's jacket pocket. It was addressed to someone named Michael. The words inside were raw, honest, and filled with a longing Eleanor had never seen from her husband. As she read, her hands trembled. The truth hit her like a tidal wave. Richard was in love with another man. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. 25 years of marriage, of shared memories and whispered promises, unraveled in an instant. Eleanor confronted Richard that night, her voice shaking as she demanded answers. For the first time, Richard let the mask fall. He confessed everything: his years of confusion, his secret relationship with Michael, and the unbearable weight of living a double life. Eleanor's heart broke, not just for herself, but for the man she knew. She realized that the years of trying for a child, the endless doctor visits, the quiet disappointments, none of it had been her fault. Richard's secret had shaped their entire marriage, casting a shadow over every hope and dream they'd shared. The divorce was swift and silent. Friends whispered, neighbors speculated, but Eleanor kept her head high. She moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, surrounded by memories she couldn't escape. The loneliness was crushing at first. She missed the sound of Richard's laughter, the comfort of his presence, and the future they'd planned together. But most of all, she mourned the family they never had. A family she now knew was never truly possible. As the months passed, Eleanor began to rebuild. She joined a book club, started volunteering at the local animal shelter, and slowly, painfully, learned to live on her own. She discovered a quiet strength she never knew she had. For the first time in her life, she was free to be herself, no longer defined by her marriage or her longing for children. But the story doesn't end there. While Eleanor was learning to embrace her new life, Richard's world was falling apart. His relationship with Michael, the man he'd risked everything for, crumbled under the weight of guilt and regret. Michael left, unable to handle the fallout of Richard's choices, alone and adrift. Richard spiraled into depression, haunted by the family he'd lost and the pain he'd caused. Eleanor heard about Richard's struggles through mutual friends. She felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Part of her wanted to reach out, to offer comfort to the man she'd loved for so long. But another part of her knew that some wounds could never be healed. She had spent too many years sacrificing her own happiness for someone else's secrets. Now, at 50, Eleanor stands at a crossroads. She is alone, but not broken. She has learned that happiness doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it's found in the quiet moments. Watching the sunrise, sharing a laugh with a friend, or simply learning to love yourself after years of doubt. Her story is a reminder that life is unpredictable, and that truth can change everything. But it's also a story of resilience, of finding hope in the ashes of heartbreak, and of the courage it takes to start over when the world you knew is gone. Eleanor's days began to take on a new rhythm. The silence of her apartment, once suffocating, became a canvas for rediscovery. She started each morning with a walk through the neighborhood, breathing in the crisp air and letting her thoughts wander. Sometimes she would pass by the old house she and Ricard had shared, its windows glowing with the memories of a life that no felt like someone else's story. She wondered if Richard ever looked out those windows and thought of her, or if he was too lost in his own regrets to notice the world moving on without him. At the animal shelter, Eleanor found unexpected comfort. The dogs and cats didn't care about her past or the secrets that had unraveled her marriage. They greeted her with wagging tails and hopeful eyes, eager for a kind word or a gentle touch. She poured her heart into caring for them, finding solace in their simple needs and unconditional affection. The shelter became her sanctuary, a place where she could give love without fear of betrayal. It was there that she met Linda, a fellow volunteer with a quick wit and a contagious laugh. Linda had her own scars, her own stories of love lost and dreams deferred. The two women bonded over shared cups of coffee and long conversations about life's twists and turns. For the first time since her divorce, Eleanor felt truly seen. Linda didn't judge her for the choices she'd made or the regrets she carried. Instead, she offered friendship, a lifeline in a sea of loneliness. As the seasons changed, so did Eleanor. She began to let go of bitterness that had threatened to consume her. She realized that Richard's secret wasn't just a betrayal, it was a tragedy for them both. He had spent years hiding his true self, trapped by fear and shame. Eleanor wondered what might have happened if Richard had been honest from the start. Would they have parted as friends, or would their love have found a different path? The questions lingered, but she knew there were no easy answers. One evening, as Eleanor sat on her balcony watching the sun dip below the horizon, she received a message from an old friend. It was a simple note asking how she was doing and inviting her to a small gathering. At first, Eleanor hesitated. She had grown used to her solitude, wary of the pitying glances and awkward questions that often came with social events. But something inside her stirred, a quiet longing for connection, for laughter, for the warmth of human company. She decided to go. The gathering was held at a cozy cafe, filled with the hum of conversation and the clink of coffee cups. Eleanor felt a flutter of nerves as she walked in, but her friend greeted her with open arms. The evening passed in a blur of stories and laughter, and for the first time in years, Eleanor felt a spark of hope. She realized that her life wasn't over. It was simply changing, evolving into something new. Meanwhile, Richard's world continued to unravel. The man who hadn't seemed so confident and composed was now a shadow of his former self. After Michael left, Richard tried to fill the void with work, with distractions, with anything that might numb the pain. But nothing worked. The guilt of what had done to Eleanor gnawed at him, a constant reminder of the life he had destroyed. He reached out to old friends, but most had drifted away, unable to understand the choices he had made. Even his family kept their distance, struggling to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the reality of his secret life. Richard found himself alone in a way he had never experienced before. The house that had once been filled with laughter and love was now silent, echoing with memories he couldn't escape. One night, unable to sleep, Richard sat in the darkness and wrote a letter to Eleanor. He poured out his heart, apologizing for the pain he had caused and the years he had stolen from her. He confessed that he had always admired her strength, her kindness, and her unwavering loyalty. Admitted that he had been a coward, too afraid to face the truth, and that he would carry the weight of his choices for the rest of his life. Eleanor received the letter on a rainy afternoon. She read it slowly, tears streaming down her face as she absorbed Richard's words. The pain was still there, raw and aching, but so was a sense of closure. For the first time, she understood that Richard's betrayal had not been about her. It had been about his own struggle to accept himself. She realized that forgiveness was not about excusing what had happened, but about freeing herself from tensions of the past. With time, Eleanor found peace. She continued to volunteer at shelter, to nurture her friendships, and to explore new passions. She took up painting, filling her apartment with vibrant colors and bold strokes. She traveled to places she had always dreamed of visiting, savoring the freedom that came with living life on her own terms. Yet, there were moments when the old regrets resurfaced, especially the ache of never having children. She watched as friends became grandparents, their lives filled with the laughter of little ones. Sometimes she wondered what her life might have been like if things had been different, but she also knew that dwelling on what could have been would only steal the joy from what was. Eleanor learned to celebrate the family she had created for herself, the friends who stood by her, the animals she cared for, and the community that embraced her. She discovered that love could take many forms and that happiness was not defined by the traditional markers of success. She was no longer just a wife or a would-be mother. She was Eleanor, a woman who had survived heartbreak and found her own way forward. As for Richard, his journey was far more difficult. The loneliness he had once feared became his constant companion. He tried to reach out to Eleanor again, hoping for forgiveness, for friendship, for some kind of connection. But Eleanor knew that some doors once closed could never be reopened. She wished him well, but she was determined to protect the new life Ash had built. Eleanor's world, once defined by the boundaries of her marriage, now stretched out before her like an open road. She found herself doing things she'd never dared to try before. She signed up for a pottery class at the community center, her hands clumsy at first but growing more confident with each session. The feel of the clay, cool and yielding beneath her fingers, was strangely therapeutic. She shaped bowls and vases, each one imperfect but uniquely hers. The act of creation became a metaphor for her own life, messy, unpredictable, but ultimately beautiful in its own way. Her friendship with Linda deepened, and together they explored new hobbies and adventures. They took day trips to nearby towns, sampling local cuisine and browsing antique shops. They laughed over shared memories and supported each other through moments of doubt. Linda, who had lost her husband to illness years before, understood the ache of loneliness and the challenge of starting over. Their bond was a reminder that family could be chosen, and that love could be found in unexpected places. Eleanor also began to reconnect with her own family. Her sister Margaret had always been supportive, but the distance between them had grown over the years. Now, with time and healing, Eleanor reached out. They spent weekends together, reminiscing about their childhood and forging new memories. Margaret's children welcomed Eleanor into their lives, and she found joy in being an aunt, offering guidance, sharing stories, and celebrating milestones. It wasn't the motherhood she had once dreamed of, but it was a kind of family, and it filled a part of her heart that she thought would always remain empty, despite these new beginnings. There were still nights when the past crept in. Eleanor would lie awake, replaying old conversations and wondering if she had missed the signs. Had Richard ever truly loved her, or had he simply been playing a role? Was there something she could have done differently, some way to change the outcome? These questions haunted her, but with each passing day, their grip loosened. She realized that some mystery as old never be solved, and that peace came from accepting what could not be changed. Richard, meanwhile, was trapped in a cycle of regret. The freedom he had once craved now felt like a prison. He tried to fill the emptiness with distractions, work, television, meaningless encounters, but nothing could erase the pain of what he had lost. He missed Eleanor's steady presence, her gentle humor, the way she made even the smallest moments feel special. He missed the life they had built together, even as he knew it had been built on a foundation of lies. His relationship with Michael had been passionate but tumultuous. The excitement of secrecy had quickly given way to the harsh realities of living openly. Michael wanted a partner who could embrace his identity without shame or fear, but Richard was still learning to accept himself. The pressure became too much, and eventually, Michael walked away. Richard was left alone. His world reduced to a series of empty rooms and unanswered questions. He sought therapy, hoping to make sense of his choices and find a way forward. The sessions were painful, forcing him to confront truths he had spent a lifetime avoiding. He spoke of his childhood, of the expectations placed upon him, of the fear that had shaped every decision. He admitted Dave had loved Eleanor in his own way, but that he had never been able to give her the life she deserved. The therapist encouraged him to forgive himself, to let go of the past and focus on the future. But forgiveness, Richard discovered, was much harder than it sounded. Eleanor, on the other hand, was learning to forgive, not just Ricard, but herself. She forgave herself for the years spent trying to fix something that was never truly broken, for the dreams that had slipped through her fingers, for the moments of anger and bitterness. She realized that her worth was not defined by her marriage or her ability to have children. She was enough, just as she was. One afternoon, as she walked through the park, Eleanor encountered a young couple struggling with a stroller. The baby inside was crying, and the parents looked exhausted. Eleanor offered a kind word and a helping hand, soothing the baby with a gentle touch. The parents thanked her, and as she looked away, Eleanor felt a pang of longing. But instead of sadness, she felt gratitude for the chance to offer comfort, for the ability to connect with others, for the life she was building. She began to volunteer at a local children's center, reading stories and organizing activities. The children adored her, drawn to her warmth and patience. Eleanor found joy in their laughter, in the way they looked at the world with wonder and curiosity. She realized that motherhood could take many forms, and that she could make a difference in the lives of others. Even if her own path had been different than she had planned, Richard heard about Eleanor's new life through mutual friends. He was both proud and envious of her resilience. He wished he could find the same peace, the same sense of purpose. He tried to reach out again, sending a message congratulating her on her volunteer work. Eleanor responded politely but kept her distance. She knew that reopening old wounds would only bring more pain. As the years passed, Eleanor's life continued to blossom. Shettervold learned new skills and deepened her relationships. She faced challenges, of course, moments of doubt, setbacks, and the occasional wave of loneliness. But she faced them with courage and grace, drawing strength from lessons she had learned. Richard, too, began to heal, slowly and painfully. He found solace in small routines, gardening, cooking, reading. He made new friends, joined support groups, and started to accept himself for who he was. The pain of the past never fully disappeared, but it became a part of his story, a reminder of the cost of living a lie. Their lives, once intertwined, now in parallel, each shaped by the choices they had made, each searching for meaning in the aftermath of heartbreak. As time moved forward, Eleanor's world grew richer, layered with new experiences and relationships that filled the spaces once occupied by sorrow. She became a fixture at the children's center, her presence eagerly anticipated by the kids and staff alike. Her storytime sessions were legendary. She brought characters to life with her expressive voice and animated gestures, drawing laughter and wonder from her young audience. The children's trust and affection became a balm for her soul, soothing the ache of what she'd lost and reminding her that love could be given and received in countless ways. Eleanor's confidence blossomed. She started a small blog, sharing her journey of healing and self-discovery. Her honest reflections resonated with readers from all walks of life, women who had faced betrayal, men who struggled with their own secrets, and people who simply needed to know they weren't alone. The messages poured in, words of encouragement, stories of similar pain, and gratitude for her vulnerability. Eleanor realized that by sharing her truth, she was helping others find their own paths to healing. Her friendship with Linda continued to be a source of strength. The two women supported each other through life's ups and downs, celebrating victories and offering comfort during setbacks. They took a trip to the coast, walking along the shoreline and talking late into the night. The ocean's vastness reminded Eleanor of the endless possibilities that still lay ahead. She felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known in years. A freedom born not from the absence of pain, but from the courage to face it and move forward. Meanwhile, Richard's journey was marked by struggle and introspection. Therapy forced him to confront the choices that had led him to this point. He grappled with guilt, shame, and the fear that he would never truly belong anywhere. The support groups he attended were filled with stories like his, men and women who had hidden their true selves for years, only to find that the truth, when finally revealed, brought both liberation and loss. Richard began to write as well, though his words were never shared. He filled journals with letters to Eleanor, to Michael, to his younger self. He wrote about the fear that had shaped his life, the love he had felt for Eleanor, and the regret that haunted him. Through writing, he began to understand that his actions, while deeply hurtful, had been driven by a desperate need for acceptance. He started to forgive himself, little by little, though the process was slow and often painful. One day, Richard ran into Michael at a coffee shop. The encounter was awkward at first, both men unsure of what to say. But as they talked, the old anger and hurt gave way to understanding. Michael had moved on, found happiness with someone new, but he wished Richard well. The conversation was brief, but it marked a turning point for Richard. He realized that holding into the past was only keeping him from finding peace in the present. Eleanor, too, was learning to let go. She no longer measured her worth by the milestones she hadn't reached or the dreams that had slipped away. Instead, she focused on the life she was building, one filled with purpose, connection, and joy. She celebrated her 55th birthday surrounded by friends, laughter echoing through her apartment. There were no children or grandchildren, but there was love in abundance, and for the first time, that felt like enough. The contrast between Eleanor and Richard's lives became more pronounced as the years passed. Eleanor's world was vibrant, filled with color and light. She embraced new experiences, welcomed new people into her life, and found meaning in giving back to her community. She was no longer defined by her past, but by the choices she made every day to live fully and authentically. Richard's world, while quieter, was not without hope. He found comfort in small routines, tending to his garden, cooking meals from scratch, reading novels that transported him to other worlds. He made a few close friends, people who accepted him for who he was, flaws and all. He learned to enjoy his own company, to find peace in solitude. The depression that had threatened to consume him gradually loosened its grip, replaced by a quiet acceptance of his life as it was, despite their separate paths. Eleanor and Richard remained connected in subtle ways. They would occasionally exchange holiday cards, brief notes filled with well wishes and updates. There was no bitterness, only a gentle acknowledgement of the bond they had once shared. Both understood that forgiveness was not about forgetting, but about releasing the hold of the past and allowing themselves to move forward. Eleanor's blog continued to grow, attracting a community of writers who found solace in her words. She was invited to speak at local events, sharing her story with others who were struggling to rebuild their lives after loss. Her message was simple but powerful. Healing is possible, even after the deepest wounds. She encouraged others to seek connection, to embrace vulnerability, and to believe in the possibility of joy, no matter how unlikely it might seem. Richard, inspired by Eleanor's courage, began to volunteer at Alakal LGBTQ+ Center. He mentored younger men who were struggling with their identities, offering support and understanding born from his own hard-won experience. Through helping others, he found a sense of purpose that had long eluded him. He realized that while he could not change the past, he could use history to make a difference in the lives of others. Their journeys, though separate, were marked by a shared resilience, a testament to the human capacity for growth and transformation. Both had been broken by betrayal and regret, but both had found ways to heal, to forgive, and to move forward. Their lives were not what they had imagined, but they were rich in ways neither could have foreseen. As the years continued to pass, Eleanor and Richard each found their own version of happiness. Their story, once defined by heartbreak, became a story of hope, a reminder that even in the aftermath of loss, new beginnings are always possible. Eleanor's life, now a tapestry of new friendships, meaningful work, and self-discovery, continued to surprise her. She had become a mentor to several women at the Children's Center, guiding them through their own struggles with relationships, loss, and self-worth. Her wisdom, hard-won through years of pain and healing, was a beacon for those who felt lost. She listened without judgment, offering gentle advice and a shoulder to lean on. The gratitude she received, in return, filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known during her years of longing for a traditional family. One spring afternoon, the center organized a community fair. Eleanor was in charge of the storytelling tent, and as she watched the children gather around, she felt a surge of pride. She had created something beautiful, a space where imagination and kindness flourished. Parents thanked her for her dedication, and several confided that their children spoke of Miss Eleanor Athome, eager for the next story time. In those moments, Eleanor realized that her legacy would not be measured by the children she bore, but by the lives she touched. Her relationship with Linda deepened further, evolving into a sisterhood that neither had expected but both cherished. They supported each other through health scares, family dramas, and the everyday challenges of growing older. They celebrated holidays together, creating new traditions that filled the void left by old ones. Eleanor found herself looking forward to these gatherings, her home filled with laughter, warmth, and the comforting presence of someone who truly understood her journey. Yet, even as she thrived, Eleanor never forgot the pain that had brought her to this point. She used her blog to write openly about her regrets, the ache of childlessness, the betrayal she had endured, and the long road to forgiveness. Her honesty resonated with readers, many of whom shared their own stories of heartbreak and resilience. Eleanor responded to every message, offering encouragement and reminding her readers that healing was not a destination, but a journey. Meanwhile, Richard's life had settled into a quieter, more contemplative rhythm. He continued his volunteer work at the LGBTQ+ Center, finding fulfillment in helping others navigate the challenges he had once faced alone. The young men he mentored looked up to him, grateful for his empathy and hard-earned wisdom. Richard saw echoes of his younger self in their struggles, the fear, the confusion, the longing for acceptance. He did his best to guide them towards self-acceptance, hoping to spare them the pain of living a lie.
Richard's relationship with his family remained complicated. Some relatives had come to accept his truth, while others kept their distance. Holidays were often bittersweet, marked by both reconciliation and absence. Richard learned to cherish the connections he still had, focusing on the love that remained rather than the relationships that had been lost. He found solace in his garden, tending to the flowers and vegetables with a care that mirrored his approach to healing, patient, persistent, and hopeful. Despite the progress he had made, Richard still struggled with moments of deep regret. He thought often of Eleanor, wondering if she had truly forgiven him, if she had found the happiness he had been unable to give her. He reread her blog posts, marveling at her strength and vulnerability. Her words inspired him to keep moving forward, to believe that redemption was possible, even after the most devastating mistakes. One day, Richard received an invitation to a community event at the Children's Center. Eleanor's name was listed as a featured speaker. He hesitated, unsure if his presence would be welcome, but something compelled him to attend. He sat quietly at the back of the room as Eleanor took the stage, her voice steady and clear as she shared her story. She spoke of love and loss, of betrayal and forgiveness, of the unexpected paths that life could take. Her words were raw and honest, and Richard felt tears prick his eyes as he listened. After the event, Richard approached Eleanor, unsure of what to say. She greeted him with a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting both the pain of their shared past and the peace she had found. They spoke quietly, exchanging updates on their lives. There was no anger, no bitterness, only a mutual understanding that they had both been changed by what had happened. Richard apologized once more, his voice trembling with emotion. Eleanor placed a hand on his arm, assuring him that she had found forgiveness, not just for him, but for herself as well. Their conversation was brief, but it brought a sense of closure that had eluded them for years. They parted with a hug, each grateful for the chance to say goodbye to the ghosts of their past. Richard left the event feeling lighter, as if a burden he had carried for decades had finally been lifted. Eleanor, too, felt a sense of release. She realized that forgiveness was not a single act, but a process, one that required courage, compassion, and a willingness to let go of old wounds. She returned home that evening, her heart full of gratitude for the journey she had traveled. She knew that her story was far from over, that there would be new challenges and new joys ahead. But she faced the future with hope, confident in her ability to weather whatever storms might come. As the years continued to pass, Eleanor and Richard's lives remained separate, that forever intertwined by the experiences they had shared. They each found their own version of happiness, shaped by the choices they had made and the lessons they had learned. Their story, once defined by heartbreak and regret, had become a testament to the power of resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Years slipped by, and the seasons of Eleanor's life continued to change. She grew older, her hair silvering, her face lined with the gentle marks of laughter and sorrow. Yet there was a lightness to her step, a quiet confidence that came from having survived the worst and found beauty on the other side. She remained a beloved figure at the Children's Center, her influence rippling outward through the lives she touched. Former students, now grown, would return to visit, bringing their own children to meet the woman who had once sparked their imaginations and comforted their fears. Eleanor's home became a gathering place, filled with the voices of friends, neighbors, and the many people who had become her chosen family. She continued to write, her blog evolving into a memoir that was published to quiet acclaim. Readers from around the world reached out, sharing how her story had helped them find hope in their own darkest moments. Eleanor was humbled by the impact her words had made, grateful that her pain had not been in vain. She spoke at conferences and workshops, always returning to the same message, that healing is possible, that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves, and that happiness can be found in the most unexpected places. Linda remained by her side, their friendship a constant source of joy and support. Together they traveled, explored new hobbies, and faced the challenges of aging with humor and grace. They celebrated each other's milestones, mourned each other's losses, and built a life rich in love and meaning. Eleanor often reflected on how different her life had become from what she once imagined, and yet, in many ways, it was more fulfilling than she could have ever hoped. Richard's journey, too, continued. He found a measure of peace in his quiet routines, his garden flourishing under his care. He became a mentor to many at the LGBTQ+ Center, his story a cautionary tale, but also a beacon of hope for those struggling to accept themselves. He learned to cherish the small moments, morning sunlight on his kitchen table, the scent of blooming roses, the laughter of friends who had become his family. He never remarried, content to live simply and honestly, grateful for the second chance he had been given to live as his true self. Occasionally, Richard and Eleanor would cross paths at community events or through mutual friends. Their interactions were warm, marked by a deep respect and understanding. They spoke of the past without bitterness, acknowledging the pain, but also the growth that had come from it. They had both learned that life rarely unfolds as planned, but that it is possible to find meaning and joy even after the deepest wounds. One autumn evening, Eleanor sat on her porch, watching the leaves drift to the ground. She thought of the life she had lived, the love she had given, the heartbreak she had endured, the strength she had discovered within herself. She remembered the years of longing for a child, the ache that had once seemed unbearable, and as she looked around at the friends who had become her family, at the children whose lives she had touched, she realized that her legacy was not defined by what she lacked, but by what she had given. Richard, too, found himself reflecting on the choices he had made. He knew that he could never undo the hurt he had caused, but he also understood that he had done the best he could with the tools he had at the time. He had learned to forgive himself, to accept his imperfections, and to find peace in the life he had built. He hoped that in some small way, his story might help others avoid the mistakes he had made. Their story, in the end, was not one of villains and victims, but of two people doing their best to navigate the complexities of love, identity, and forgiveness. It was a story of loss, yes, but also of resilience, growth, and the possibility of new beginnings. Eleanor and Richard had both been broken by the truth, but they had also been set free by it. They had learned that happiness is not a destination, but a journey, one that requires courage, compassion, and the willingness to let go of what might have been. As the sun set, Eleanor closed her eyes and breathed in the crisp autumn air. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that her life, though imperfect, was hers alone. She had loved deeply, lost profoundly, and found her way back to herself. She hoped that those who heard her story would find comfort in knowing that they too could survive heartbreak and build a life filled with meaning and joy. Richard, sitting in his garden, looked up at the stars and felt a quiet gratitude. He knew that he would always carry the scars of his past, but he also knew that he had the power to shape his future. He hoped that others would learn from his mistakes, that they would have the courage to live authentically and love without fear. Their lives, once intertwined, had taken separate paths, but both had found their own versions of happiness. Their story was a testament to the power of truth, the necessity of forgiveness, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. And now, as you reflect on Eleanor and Richard's journey, ask yourself, what would you have done in their place? Is it better to live a comfortable lie or to risk everything for the truth? Can forgiveness truly set us free, or are some wounds too deep to heal? The answers are not simple, and perhaps that is the point. Life is messy, unpredictable, and often heartbreaking, but it is also filled with moments of beauty, connection, and hope. So, what do you think? Was Eleanor right to forgive? Was Richard's search for authenticity worth the pain it caused? In the end, only you can decide. Their story is over, but yours is still being written. Choose wisely, love deeply, and never be afraid to seek the truth, even when it hurts.